conference championships are in the books, and the college football final rankings are out. On December 28th, we get two games. The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, which is one of the semifinal games between number 4 Oklahoma and number 1 LSU. LSU is favored by 12 points in that game. Now, also on December 28th, PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, which is another semifinal game, is between number 2 Ohio State and number 3 Clemson. Clemson's actually favoring this game by 1.5 points. Now, I'm going to break down the top 4 that have been released as of today and where my opinions are on all of them and why they got to where they are. So starting with number 4, Oklahoma. Oklahoma won the Big 12 championship over Baylor. As we saw, it was a great game, and Jalen Hurts really played well, except for a couple of the turnovers. He played well, and they beat Baylor twice. Both times Baylor was ranked above 10. And so that really puts them in a position to where, because Utah lost and Georgia lost, they were the slot for number 4. Because one of the major criteria for the committee is if you win a conference championship, that's a deal breaker in a lot of cases. So because Utah lost, Oregon won the Pac-12 championship, but they also lost, I believe, about a month ago to an unranked Arizona State team. So you kind of look at that, and like I said, Georgia lost the SEC championship, although they're also a 2-loss team. So you have Oklahoma, who has 1 loss, Georgia, who lost to LSU in the SEC championship, and then they also lost to an unranked South Carolina. So that kind of puts Oklahoma in the position to where they are, and they slot in at number 4. I have no problem with that at all. I think it's going to be really fun to watch Jalen Hurts play, although they are going up against the juggernaut LSU. And like I said, LSU's favored by 12 points. I think it's going to be a bloodbath, but it'll be fun to watch Jalen Hurts play and see what he can do, take that maturity and that experience into the college football playoffs again for a different team that makes history. No player has done it for 2 different teams. As Alabama sits on the outside and he kind of nods his head and says, yeah, I'm here and you aren't. So I think that's going to be awesome to watch. Moving on to number 3, Clemson. Now, Clemson didn't really play anybody this year, that's kind of their biggest issue that everybody had. But they were the national champs last year, and then they went undefeated all year long, winning the ACC championship over number 23 Virginia in a bloodbath 62-17. And that wasn't the only bloodbath. They basically murdered everybody they played this year except for UNC, where they only won by 1 point. But there's not much to say about Clemson. Like I said, national champions last year, undefeated this year, won their conference championship. I think number 3 is appropriate. It's really hard to imagine them in front of the 2 juggernauts that are going to be Ohio State and LSU coming up. So I think it's an appropriate slot for them, and we move on to number 2. Okay, so for number 2, Ohio State drops, and I don't necessarily agree with this drop, primarily because they had a really tough schedule towards the end, and although they didn't light up the scoreboard, it needs to go into the committee needs to recognize the fact that the last 3 games that Ohio State has played are significantly tougher than anybody else in the college football playoff rankings or really in the country. They finished up 2 weeks ago, number 10 Penn State, last week number 14 Michigan, and then beat number 8 Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. Now this should give some credit to them, and I don't believe the drop it's not warranted in this case. I understand LSU may be a better team in a lot of people's eyes, but not in my eyes. You have 2 Heisman candidates, including right behind Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, the quarterback for Ohio State, and then you also have defensive end Chase Young. So both of these characters that are on the Ohio State team, I think will carry them to the championship game and ultimately to the trophy. That is my opinion. There really isn't. Overall, I don't have an issue with dropping them to number 2. I understand it, but if I was in the committee, I would push hard to keep Ohio State in number 1 slot, primarily because of the reasons I just listed, the 2 Heisman candidates, and also the strong schedule they finished up with. Now, moving on to the number 1 slot, LSU, which they have definitely the most impressive offense, and as I said, Justin Fields is right behind Joe Burrow in the Heisman candidacy, so it's warranted that they would move up. But I honestly believe that this is sort of a storybook sort of thing. So obviously LSU deserves this. I'm not taking any credit away from them, but I believe that a large part in them moving to number 1, although they were for some reason moved down to number 2 a couple weeks ago for Ohio State, which was interesting. And I believe they moved back up because of this storybook sort of narrative pushing theme that's been going on. So you have Joe Burrow, he has a great story, and then you have them they go into Tuscaloosa. They haven't beat Alabama in X amount of years, and they always struggle. They beat Alabama, and then they just light up the scoreboard throughout every single campaign that they had this year. I mean, against A&M, I remember it was 50-7, I believe the final score was, or something along those lines. So they definitely played lights out every single time. Although their defense was spotty in certain games, I don't believe that should be held against them. And overall, because of the offensive capability and because of the Heisman candidate they have at QB who is playing lights out, I think they are well deserving of the number 1 slot. And I think they're going to blow out Oklahoma. I think if Ohio State was in this slot, I think the spread would be maybe just a little bit lower than 12 points, but I still think Ohio State would blow out Oklahoma. And that's not a credit to, or that's not to discredit Oklahoma of anything. I just think these two teams are just far and away way better than anybody else, the other two in this ranking. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to watch Clemson kind of play more difficult teams, because we've like I said, they've been playing basically nobody all year except for the ACC championship against Virginia, and Virginia was ranked 23rd. So it's going to be interesting to watch that. As for the other top bowl games, I have them listed right here in front of me. So the Cotton Bowl this year is going to be number 17 Memphis against number 10 Penn State. I said the Peach Bowl, number 1 LSU against number 4 Oklahoma. The Fiesta Bowl, number 2 Ohio State against number 3 Clemson. The Orange Bowl, number 9 Florida against number 24 Virginia. The Rose Bowl this year will be number 6 Oregon, the Pac-12 champions, against number 8 Wisconsin, who lost in the Big Ten championship to Ohio State. And then lastly, the Sugar Bowl, which is going to be a great game between number 5 Georgia and number 7 Baylor. So a lot of great games coming up towards the turn of the year and on New Year's Day. Again, my final pick for the championship is I think Ohio State is going to go all the way just because of the consistency on defense, the two studs that are in the Heisman race, and their ability to dictate their will on a game. Now, that's all I have for you guys, so check me out on Twitter, @AlexDeclaire. Check out our Instagram, @IdealSportsEntertainment. Check out the website, www.idealsportsentertainment.com. All of the material is posted there, all the content we put out, and make sure to keep up. Subscribe to this channel. Leave a comment, whatever you think your predictions are. If you think LSU should be number 2 or Ohio State, or if you have a problem with anything I said, I would love to discuss it with you. And besides that, I will see you next time.